Good morning and welcome to Church at Home with Rachael for Wednesday, the 28th of June. This year is flying by, isn't it? I hope you're getting ready for summer. As some of you know, I've been sort of stinking busy lately, and some of you might also know how much I love to read. And so, even if I'm like extremely tired, I take at least 10 minutes to read in bed before I go to sleep. And over the last week or so, I've been reading this book by Andrew Greeley called The Senator and the Priest. I know I mentioned it before last week, I think. I just finally finished this last night. And I got to tell you, I am a big Andrew Greeley fan. Andrew Greeley, he's deceased now, but he was a Roman Catholic priest, and he wrote murder mysteries and other kinds of stories about Ireland and Chicago and Father Blackie Ryan, who was a bishop in the church. That was one of his main characters, who pops into most of the books, regardless of whether they're one of the his murder mysteries. But I picked this one up, and it wasn't a mystery. It was a novel, and it's about a Roman Catholic Irish young man from Chicago who is married to an Irish woman and have three beautiful Irish daughters. They all have red hair, and his his decision. He's a lawyer, and he runs for Senate and becomes a senator from Chicago, and it tells the story of his run to become a senator as a Democrat, and the hijinks, the not just hijinks, but the actual like assassination attempts to keep him from running, that are sponsored by rich people, oil people, oil person, and others along with them. Crude and false media reports, things like that, and a senator who's trying to replace he's running against, who refuses to believe the results of an election, and as a matter of fact, spends the whole 6 years that Tommy Moran is in the Senate, serving as the senator from Chicago, having won the election. His predecessor spends the whole 6 years of his election in court trying to have his election overturned. This book, it spoke to me powerfully with a great deal of humor, and a great deal of hope about what seems to be happening in our world today, about questions about elections and the media, and how the media, which, if used properly, is an excellent source of information and dissemination of the information that we need so that we can make informed choices if used properly. But it also talks, so in the book, it balances that. There's media personalities and media outlets who are strictly abiding to the truth and do their due diligence to research allegations and things like that. And then on the other end of the scale, there is a reporter and a newspaper and several other outlets that are basically in the pocket of the rich and those who don't want the senators to succeed, who are consistently lying about him, and very much Michelle Obama's "they go low, we go high" is how this senator works. In the storyline, his in the beginning, when he decides to run for senator, he tells them he will not use negative campaign ads, negative campaigning. He will not resort to responding in like kind to those who use negative ads, negative campaign against him. He will not go out and ask for money, nor will he allow himself to know who gave what money. He has people who do the fundraising and things like that, not asking for money but receiving it, and people who are willing to do that and keep that information to themselves. But he doesn't want himself to be influenced, even subconsciously, by who gave what to him, and so who might own him when he becomes a senator, if he wins. Of course, he does win twice, giving the story away, but you kind of know that when you start to read it. But also, interestingly enough, is his brother in the story. His brother is his name is Tommy. His brother's name is Tony. His brother is a Roman Catholic priest who is completely against his brother running for Senate, and through the story makes an arse of himself and actually does quite a bit of harm to the family in his reactions to his little brother taking on the system. And of course, in Andrew Greeley style, in the end, there is a conversion moment and all is well. And it needs to be. It's a good thing. What amazes me as I was reading this, I kept thinking, but Andrew Greeley, it sounds like it was written for 2022, 2023. And I went back and checked to see when the copyright was. It was written and it was published in 2006. Now, granted, in 2006, I was 25 years old. I was between university degrees. I'm taking a year between my bachelor's and my master's degree. And I was not paying much attention to the news, certainly not political news then. So I don't know what was happening in the States. There are allusions to things that didn't go well for Democrats and Republicans in this book. Andrew Greeley is very even-handed in his criticisms. But it's when I was reading this book, it was like he was prophetic. He was speaking to a situation that is clearly happening today, almost 20 years ago. And I find that really interesting, the idea that someone, a Roman Catholic priest at that, could write something with such profundity and such foresight, even if simply what he was doing was writing about things that were happening that way at that time. He seems very prophetic. And in reading a book like this, and the way that it's written, it's so easy to read. And it makes you laugh out loud sometimes, and sometimes it'll make you cry and make you hot under the collar, and other times you'll be like, oh, okay, yeah, okay, that's cool. It's a really powerful read that because it's literature, because it's art, it's not true. It makes us be able to take a look at things. It encourages us to be able to take a look at things and see them from a different perspective, and maybe take a look then at what's happening in the world and be able to say, okay, is that right? Is this wrong? Should these things be like this? That's one of the beautiful things about art, whether it's music or literature like this, or physical art like movies, or paintings or sculpture, is the artist can become prophet. And the artist can share with us a vision of the world that we might be seeing every day. But because we see it every day through our own context, our own biases, things like that, we may not be able to recognize a greater truth about what we're seeing every day. And art allows us a glimpse, because we're not looking at the world, we're looking at an piece of artwork. We're reading a piece of literature. We're listening to a spoken word or a sung word that filters us through someone else's perspective. We're not looking from our own unique and very individual and often closed off perspective. I'll speak about that in a second. We're looking through we're being reflected or deflected through someone else's vision. And sometimes that simply opens up a different window through which we can look at our world. Now, a moment ago, I said we look through this sort of narrow place. We have to. We look at things from the experiences that we have had, from the books we've read, the education we've had, from the context in which we live. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It's great that we acknowledge that. But it's also great if we can acknowledge that we are living within this box that is our lives. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we can see everything. It's like when I take off my glasses, you can still see me, but I can't see, I can't see you anyway, but I can't even see me in the computer screen because I have removed my ability to see. Now, if I put my glasses back on, my vision gets wider. Now, if I could put glasses that had lenses that wrapped around my eyes, that I could see peripherally as clearly as I see this way, my vision would be greater. And I think that's what art does. I think that's what things like this do, is they give us that almost a peripheral vision. They give us a view of things we can't have on our own. And that's okay. That's normal. But it opens us up that we are able now to see things from a different perspective. And then once we have seen something from a different perspective, when we come back to our own sightline, we recognize our sightline has changed forever. We can't unsee what we have seen. We can't unhear what we have heard. We can't unfeel what we have felt. And I think that's really powerful. I think that using art as prophecy, and prophecy does not mean, fortune telling. A prophet is not one who necessarily sits down and tells you that, here are the winning numbers for next week's lottery ticket. Wouldn't that be great? Or tells you whether or not you're going to get cancer and die. A prophet is one who can look into the future and say to you, this is what's happening, not because they see the future, but because they're able to tell you what's happening here. The prophets in the Bible were not, sometimes probably were, but were not necessarily always predicting something that would happen in the future. They were understanding what was happening right now and making those educated guesses to extrapolate what would happen in the future. And then looking back on those things, we can see that they were right. Those prophets that we can look back and say, hey, yeah, those things happened. It's not because God gave them some vision into 100 years from now. What God gave them was clarity of vision into what was happening right now, and the ability to think critically about, if this is what's happening right now, what will happen because of this in the future. And that's what I think I saw. That's what I know I saw when I read this book, The Senator and the Priest by Andrew M. Greeley. It wasn't necessarily Andrew Greeley saying, this is what I think will happen, and I'm going to put it, he was seeing what was happening in the world, and he wrote prophetically, naming what was happening, and then being able to share it with those who would read it, so that their perspective might be broadened. So I really do, if you have not read Andrew Greeley, especially if you like mysteries, The Bishop or the Bishop and the Lake, The Bishop and the, all the different things. If you like mysteries, they're awesome. They're not difficult to read, and there's nothing sexual or anything in them. They're very gentle. I really highly recommend him, but all of his books are incredible. But I do also recommend that maybe, if you haven't already thought of it, think about those experiences of art in those many different forms as opportunities to broaden your horizons, to open up your context, and to be able to see the world a little bit differently. That might actually help us all to work in the world a little bit differently, a little bit better. So just some thoughts on that, just some ideas, a suggestion about reading, especially when the summer's coming. But have a think on it. Have a great day. God bless. And I will see you again tomorrow for Church at Home with Rachael.